we're back. And honestly, we're back and we're better than ever, baby. Oh my God, that sounds way too much like Call Her Daddy. It's literally just how I talk though, so sorry, Alex and Sophia. I know that's a sore subject anyway, but anyways, hey, wow, episode 3. We're here, we made it. So, episode 2 was really heavy, and I apologize, but I just had to get that out. Had to get that stuff out of me. Had to get you guys to understand about me. So thanks for holding on to that rope. And now we're moving on. So if you noticed, my podcast is called The Funny Infertile Former Fat Friend. So episode 1 was just an introduction, like, hey, what's up? A little bit about me. Not a lot about me, but a little bit about me. Last week was funny. I had told you guys about my trauma response, and it's funny. And obviously that's some heavy trauma that had happened to me at a young age. So this week we're going to talk about infertility. Wow. I always say that it is the worst club with the best members. I saw that on Instagram, and sorry, I'm like sniffly right now, but I'm not crying. I saw that on Instagram one time, and like it just has stuck with me because it's the truth. And if you've ever battled with infertility, I hope that you have won, and I hope that you've beat it. However, if you have not, or if you are in the trenches, and if you are in the worst club with the best members, I feel for you. So I'm going to talk this week a little bit about my infertility. And if this is something that's interesting to you, great. If not, I'll see you probably not next week because we'll probably still be talking about this, but I'll see you on the next one. So yeah, let's get to it. Okay, so here we go. Let's see. I'm trying not to like write all of this stuff down and like read it, but please bear with me because there's like a whole lot from then to now. So I have never in my whole entire years had a normal cycle ever. Thinking back to when I started my period, I actually was so fortunate. I started my period on Christmas morning when I was in 7th grade. Yeah, 7th grade. So at that time I was 11, and my aunt and cousins had kind of like prepared me like, hey, something's going to be coming soon, and let's just go ahead and get you some pads so that when the time comes, you're ready. So thankfully I was prepped. I was prepared for that to happen, and Christmas morning, lo and behold, it started. It was the greatest gift that never worked, and I couldn't take it back. So it started, and it wasn't crazy. It wasn't your normal. I think it was literally like a day and a half, and then I, without having a mom, was like, this is embarrassing. I can't tell my dad. And it's Christmas. I'm not going to make a big deal about it so that my whole family knows on Christmas. So I'm sure I probably kept it to myself until like the following day or even the next. And I'm sure my cousin Anna came over to babysit us, and I probably told her like, hey, this is what's going on. But at that time it had already stopped, so didn't even think anything about it. So it started. And then I remember another time, I've actually never told anyone this. I'm so embarrassed, but it's important and it's part of the story. But I remember that summer, like I said, it was never normal. I don't even honestly know how many times it came. If it did, like it should have once a month. I don't even think it did. But I remember that summer I was home at, my stepmom's house, and I had started, and like, it was like a gush, which was so embarrassing. And long story short, it like gushed and then stopped. But I was too embarrassed to tell anyone. And like I said, I'm going to spare you the great details of all of that. But I just was too embarrassed. And now thinking back, like, why were you embarrassed? But, you know, being me and the situation that I was in, I was just so embarrassed. So I just happy-go-lucky, like it was normal. I remember in high school, and if Stacey Hollingsworth hears this, she's probably going to wring my neck. But I actually, my senior year, I literally hated my first hour on white days, I think. I don't remember. Anyways, long story short, I missed at least once a week, if not twice a week. And I would say that I had started my cycle and that I needed to go home and change. And honestly, none of that was true, which my dad was just like, whatever, do whatever you have to do. I don't care. I don't want to hear about it. But that that was a lie. I never, ever, ever, ever had a period in high school. Again, I didn't think to tell anyone. I didn't think that it was a big deal. I thought, heck yeah, like I don't have to go through this. Looking back, I should have let someone know, but I just didn't know. After I got out of high school, I went to the lady doctor and I was put on birth control, just like everyone else who goes to the lady doctor at 18. And so I started that medication. I went to the lady doctor in August. I literally had been 18 for a month, went to the doctor, started the medication, and by September, I was crying uncontrollably every single day. I was in college, and if people would look at me, I would cry. If people would speak to me, I would cry. I had a boyfriend at the time, and he was like, what in the world is wrong with you? And I was like, I don't know, because that had never been me. I just cried the whole time. And I wouldn't leave my dorm. I ended up dropping out of college. I don't want to blame it on the birth control, but it definitely rocked my world. And I never had a period with it, so I just stopped taking it because I was like, I can't stop crying. This is ridiculous. So put that out of the back of my mind and moved on. The next time that I went to the lady doctor, again, they were like, how's the birth control? And I was like, it's not going at all. So we need to do something different. So they put me on a different birth control. So that was cool. Started that. So I'm 19 at this time. It was like a full year later from my yearly checkup. Full year later. And this time, instead of crying uncontrollably, I was bleeding uncontrollably. And they were making me take like 800 ibuprofen every 3 hours to stop the bleed. So it stopped, obviously, and I was like, done with that, like completely over it. Didn't even care to think about it again until I had, it was actually like end of 2014, beginning of 2015. So by that time too, I'd been out of high school and I had for 4 years. So, again, never had any normal cycle whatsoever, but I just thought, ooh, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky. Yeah, I'm so lucky. Not. So out of high school, obviously, I was at the time working at the bar. Shout out to the Steel Rooster. If you know, you know. And we would have like college nights on Wednesdays. And I started having panic attacks. I was 22 years old. I literally lived the best life. And I started having panic attacks. I couldn't figure out why. I couldn't work. All of the people in the bar made me so nervous. I would have to literally leave mid-shift. I remember driving there one time and I could not figure out why I was driving on the left side of the car and why we don't drive in the middle. Why do I not sit in the middle and drive the car? And I cried and cried and cried. And finally I was like, okay, I have to go to the doctor. So I made like a normal doctor's appointment with a big girl doctor. And her name was Dr. Maxie at Mercy. And she's no longer there, but I loved her. And so I was like, hey, what the actual heck is going on in my brain? And she was like, yeah, that's really weird. It sounds like anxiety. And I'm like, I've never been anxious before. That's just never been me. And she's like, yeah, I know, but like these thoughts are not normal. And it's not normal to just cry and have panic attacks. And that's what you've explained. So I was like, okay, yeah, I think you're right. So she put me on like an antidepressant that was with anxiety medication. And she was like, I also want you to start on birth control, because I told her, like, you know, they ask you when was your last menstrual cycle. And I'm like, 2 years ago? She's like, I'm sorry, what? And I'm like, yeah, it just might actually have been longer, but I don't really want to talk about it. And she's like, no, we're going to talk about this. That's not normal. So she put me on a birth control. I was on it. It never started a cycle, never ended a cycle. Did that through the holidays. And January, it would have been the end of January, I randomly started a cycle. No big deal, right? Except for it was so bad. I couldn't get a handle on it. I had to call into work a couple of times. This is TMI, and I'm sorry if you don't want to hear about it. You'll have to skip through it. But I had accidents at work where I would have to go home and change my clothes. I would have accidents in bed, and I would have to change my sheets. The final straws were in the beginning of February. I had stayed the night at my friend's house. I actually had such a bad accident. I was so embarrassed. I'm still embarrassed about it. And I had to go home. So I went home, and that was on a Sunday. I went home and I laid in bed all day, and I was like, Cheyenne, what the heck is going on? And, you know, cleaned myself up, took a shower, whatever. Went to sleep that night, and I woke up that next morning, and I had on a pair of sweatpants, and I looked down, and I had actually soaked the entire sweatpants. Talk about having an actual panic attack. So I went upstairs, and my cousin I was living with Rob and Linda at the time, and my cousin Dusty was in the shower, and I knocked on the door. It was like 3:30 or 4 in the morning. Like, it was so early. And I knocked on the door, and Dusty is notorious for taking showers in the middle of the night because he couldn't breathe because he has asthma. And I knocked on the door, and he was like, come in. And I was like, hey, like, I need to hop in the shower. And he was like, well, I'm in here. And I was like, no, like, I need to hop in the shower. And he was like, well, just hold on. And I was like, okay. And I was like, well, I'm going to go to the bathroom, so don't open the door. And he was like, okay. So I go to the bathroom, and I'm like, oh my God, this is worse than it could have ever been in my whole entire life. What is going on? And so I'm like, okay, just let me know when you're done. And I go back out, and I'm like pacing the hall, you know, nervous as can be. And he shuts the water off, and I can hear him like getting out and drying off. And at that time, he opens the door in his towel, and I hit the floor. Gone. Blacked out. I wake up to him wrapping me in a blanket and rushing me to the truck. I woke up about the time we were leaving the house, and I was like, what is going on? And he was like, you have to get to the emergency room right now. I've called your dad. He's meeting us there. We're headed. So we got there, and quite frankly, it looked like a murder scene, which was what I had been experienced before, but I was able to kind of control it. However, it was uncontrollable at that time. And so want to talk about the most embarrassing. Your cousin literally has to pick you up off the floor in a blanket, and you have to meet your dad at the ER because you're uncontrollable. But at that point was when all of my whatever went out the window, and I was like, I don't care. I will no longer be silent about this because none of this is normal. So they really couldn't do much for me at the ER because I was not anemic, and I wasn't like losing blood too fast to their regulations. And so they sent me home, and they told me that they wanted me to follow up with a gynecologist, and that was that. So I don't remember when, the next day or week or whatever, went and made an appointment in Joplin. Here, I'm not going to tell you guys where I went because I was not happy about it, but you can probably figure it out. So I made an appointment and I went. They did ultrasounds, like vaginal ultrasounds, to see kind of what was going on. And they told me that, actually, no, we did the ultrasounds, we did the appointment, we did blood, and it just so happened that the day that I took off to go to the appointment, I had not ate. I'm notorious for not eating breakfast. And they were like, have you drank anything? And I was like, no, I haven't ate anything. I haven't drank anything this morning either. And they were like, perfect. You're going to go for a glucose test. And so I was like, okay, don't you just do that when you're pregnant? And they're like, yeah, but we need to know what your glucose is. And I was like, okay. So went and did that all in the same day. It was probably like a week or so later. Actually, no, that same day, the doctor was like, you need to stop what you're doing and go on Whole30. You will die if you don't go on Whole30. And I was like, oh my God. And if you know anything about the Whole30 diet, it's rough, like rough. And to go from like my life, which was McDonald's, Dr. Pepper, Chick-fil-A, Chinese, you know, the whole gambit, to Whole30, which is lean cuts of meat, chicken, steak. I don't eat fish. I don't eat pork. So for me, it was chicken, steak, and veggies. That's it. Because I also don't eat dairy. I can't remember right now off the top of my head about Whole30. I think you can't have dairy. Or if you can, it's like minimal. So long story short, I began eating Caesar salads, chicken Caesar salads, and hamburger patties with grilled onions and broccoli. And did that. Came to my follow-up appointment, and they were like, well, with all of the things that we have gathered, you have PCOS, that is polycystic ovary syndrome, and you need to see an endocrinologist today. And I was like, okay. Still having no idea what any of that meant. I'm like, yeah, for sure. That sounds great. And you need to continue Whole30. And I'm like, okay. They said, you're insulin resistant. Your glucose test came back and you're insulin resistant and you need to go and you need to make an appointment with an endocrinologist. And I was like, okay. So I made the appointment with the endocrinologist. Again, I'm not going to release who that was, but if you've been to any endocrinologists, and you will know exactly who this was. So I went, I just about gave it away. So I went to that appointment, and that endo, they call my name, you know, and I go back, I'm sitting in the room, and that endocrinologist looked at me when they came in, looked me up and down, and looked me in the eyes and said, you're not fat. Get out of my office. There's nothing I can help you with. And she turned around and walked out.